Welcome to ecotopiaU Media. I'm your host, Melissa McGinnis, joined by my co-host, Tom Wright. We have a very special guest today, Janice Hall.
Well,
Janice, thank you for joining us.
I am so pleased to be here, and I'm pleased to be seeing Tom again, whom I've known for more years than we can count, probably 30.
Yes.
We helped, we were pioneers in this industry, kind of, when people were saying, ooh, what are those funny foods and herbs you're taking? And now they're all going, those funny foods and herbs, we want them now.
So how did you start in this industry?
Well, actually, I think my first interest was wanted to become a nurse, and then I didn't like that kind of medicine, and I started studying botanicals in Santa Cruz. But prior to that, when I was working at Merrill Lynch, someone said there was a event happening on Fifth Avenue, so instead of going to lunch with the girls
So this
and
is
gossiping,
in Manhattan?
in Manhattan, on that Fifth Avenue, yeah. And so I did indeed march on Fifth Avenue with 100,000 of my new best friends for the first Earth Day, and I had a paradigm shift, I truly did. And I think that has become a filter through which I've looked at everything in my life. And I was in Santa Cruz after that and met some people. I worked with some of the early botanical people, herbalists in the natural products industry. And then I was moved they kept moving me around. I was moved to Austin, Texas. And I worked with Mark Blumenthal, the American Botanical Council, and he really introduced me to the industry. We did the Herb News, which was the predecessor to Herbalgram, which is a peer-reviewed journal on herbs. And it was Mark that gave credibility to the herb industry and botanicals. And those were the early days when John Mackey was just developing Whole Foods in Austin, Texas. And actually they had a big flood, so the nickname was Whole Floods. And so I really got to sit around the table in the very beginning
Which
of
is a
the
record
industry.
store now, by the way.
Is it really?
Yeah.
So I got to sit around the table with the early industry thought leaders and change agents, and I got to play with them. And shortly after that, I was scooped up by New Hope Natural Media, and we're here at the Natural Products Expo West. And
So you explain to the audience a little bit about who New Hope Natural Media is.
Well, this is an interesting story because Doug Green, who was named by, by Entrepreneur Magazine when he was 20 or 30 or something like that. His wife was a vegetarian, and he was in the record industry, and he saw that there was going to be a trend. He really felt that. And so there was a trade show, and he thought he could do a better job.
He visited the trade show.
He visited the trade show. Then he decided to start a magazine. And people said, well, there are already 3 magazines. And he said, I know. So he started a magazine called Natural Foods Merchandiser. And about a year or two later, there were only 3 magazines because one was gone. But Natural Foods Merchandiser was the leader. Okay, and then he said, well, let's do a trade show. Well, Doug, there is a trade show. So in 1981, he had the first trade show here in Anaheim. There were 2,000 people, all told, including
myself.
Including yourself. I was an exhibitor with Mark Blumenthal.
I was an exhibitor with R.W. Knudsen family.
Oh, you were?
Yes.
So, and my career took off after that. I got scooped up by the company that produced the trade show, and I was their associate group publisher, and I became their first director of international development. And it was an extraordinary playing ground. The New Hope Group gave you, Doug would always say, you've got an idea, go for it. And if it doesn't work, it's on you. So he gave us a lot of a lot of rope to play with, and very few people hung themselves. It was an extraordinary group. They turned this trade show. When I was working with it, first there was, 7,000 people. We used to plan this trade show on architectural drawing paper at a oak dining room table in a historic home on the Delaware River. And we had to erase
in New Hope, Pennsylvania.
In New Hope, Pennsylvania. Yeah. And we filled in all the boots in pencil. I went through a lot of erasers. This was before computers. When I left the company in 1991, there were 35,000 people coming to the show. Now, there are over 60,000 people that come to this show. And it's become the epicenter internationally for all things LOHAS, which is the term
Lifestyle.
coined for lifestyles of health and sustainability. And it's really changed the whole template of the industry. And so I had the opportunity to have this 30,000 foot view and this extraordinary playing field. And I decided I wanted to become the Director of International Development. And he said, that's a good idea, go for it. So I researched all these different countries, and I put databases together, and I researched their distribution systems, and I wrote letters in different languages to invite people to come and set up the pavilions. That would be the French pavilion, the German pavilion, and the personal care pavilion, and the organic pavilion, and blah, 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 blah. So I got to see the organization of the industry start to fine-tune itself. And then he let me do...
Sounds like you were the fine-tuner of the organization.
Well, I actually did name it the Natural Products Industry because it was called the Natural Foods Industry. And one day during one of our meetings, I said, this is bigger than
and
food.
that
Right.
had morphed from the health food industry.
Right, the health food industry.
Yeah, the Yellow Pages didn't have natural foods when I first got into this business.
was health
The
food.
Yellow Pages said health foods. Yeah. And
Exactly,
then,
and it was a mixture of Aunt Betty's favorite recipe passed down through generation and a bunch of hippies, and they all got along quite well.
That's
So
true.
you had suits and Birkenstocks.
And we still do today.
We still do today. Exactly. So it was really interesting to see how this morphed, and then you started to see more companies enter the industry, and we did. We saw that it needed to look better. So I was allowed to do seminars on packaging and promotion and teach, bring in people who were experts at that so the manufacturers could see better and more exciting ways to present their products to the consumer. And that was really the beginning of the consumer noticing it because they were able to see that the products in the natural foods industry were starting to look like the ones in the supermarkets. And so they could now learn how to replace them with natural versions of X, Y, and Z.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful. Wow.
And so what are you working on now?
Well, after I left New Hope, in 1991 to start my own company, I wanted to do international development, and I wanted to travel the world and have my clients pay for it. And I did do some of that, and I've worked with many clients in a myriad of countries. But mostly what I've done with them is my company, Natural Network International, my mission statement is really to work with people and products of integrity that make a difference in the world. And that does narrow the playing field, even in an industry like this. So there's a lot of markers. The product has to be good, the packaging has to be good, the people have to be good, and it needs to deserve a place on the shelf. We have too many consumables. And so I look for companies that do have that special messaging, and it is difficult these days because in the late 90s, the Fortune 500 noticed that this industry was growing 20% a year, and they said, let's buy it. We'll figure it out later. So they did. And then you had Procter & Gamble and Pepsi and Coke and all those companies come in. The good thing is they made it mainstream. They brought it to Walmart and Middle America, but it changed some of the template and architecture, and it made it more difficult for some of the smaller companies to get in. So I made it my mission to target those small companies that deserve a place. In the meantime, I have always seen this through the environmental filter that, going back to Earth Day, influenced my entire career. And I noticed that I did a lot of work in the NGO sector with the United Nations, with the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro, and that was mostly pro bono work. But I started to notice that the environmental industries and the natural products industries were traveling on parallel paths, and in my personal opinion,
know each other very well.
and didn't know each other.
Yeah.
And there needed to be more intersection. And as Tom has heard me say, my last name is Hall, and as a hallway connects rooms, I like to connect people and ideas. And one day someone said to me, Janice, you're a natural networker. So that's the name of my company. So I look for those connections, and what I've been doing. You had a question.
No, I was just going to point out again, your website is Natural Network.
No, actually,
International.
right now I have my website down, but it's naturalnetwork.com, but it's not up right now. I've been working. I'm like the cobbler who needs new shoes.
What event are you working with now that
Well,
has a web?
Okay, let me just tell you what is really important to me, and I think is important to this industry as well. A few years ago, when I moved to Princeton, and I was not getting smart by osmosis, my passion for the environmental issues that are so personal to me, and I think to climate change and the rest of the world, I started taking courses on environmental science, public policy, and climate change. And I started to look at how that dovetailed with the natural products industry. And I feel very passionate that we need to cross-pollinate our networks, because it's within the cross-pollination of the different sectors that I think the answers lie. And the cross-pollination of different disciplines. You've got expert leaders who are good at what they do, but the answers lie between those, across those disciplines. And some of my friends from my New Hope Boulder, Colorado days, where I worked with New Hope Natural Media in Aspen, produced a summit for the past 11 years called AREDAY. It stands for American Renewable Energy Day. AREDAY.net, AREDAY.net.
Got it.
And they were the first to cross-sector bring together thought leaders and change agents from government, business. So you have billionaires like T. Boone Pickens and Ted Turner, and the entertainment industry who brings the messaging, James Cameron, for instance, and Louis Sahoyas, to policy people from Washington, D.C., to the top scientists in the world and engineers, to people who are developing clean tech solutions, to scientists like Lester Brown, who educated me about food security, which then I started to study the application for the natural products industry. We're going to be facing food security issues because of climate change across the planet, and it's going to impact health issues, and it's going to impact supply chain issues for this industry.
I have to say that, because we're running out of time, that's a topic within itself. And we'd love to bring you back to come in and talk to us about food security. Well, thank you for all the work that you've done. It sounds like you actually really helped this show in particular streamline and get, like you were saying, really organized.
Well, I was in the right place at the right time with the right people who gave me a playing field. I was very blessed, and I really appreciate that.
Well, thanks for coming in and talking with us today and giving us some insight into your background as well as the show's background.
Thank you, both of you.
Janice.